Hi all, hope you all are doing good. As we have seen in our previous video, we understood why we are going to use LeetCode programs to solve for data engineers, right? So now in this video, we are going to mainly focus on setting up the data before we start practicing the real problem statement, right? Since we are going to use our Databricks platform here, so we need to understand how we can create data frame and Spark SQL, right, using our DataFrame and Spark SQL APIs. So in order to do that problem right, we need to have the basic understanding of how we are going to set up the data. So where do we practice it, and what are all libraries that we are going to import? How do you set up the sample data which you will be solving using the problem statement from the LeetCode, right? So here initially we will be trying to import the libraries which is required to achieve to create the data frame and apply the functions to do some operations with the data frame and all that, right? So we'll be importing all those required libraries. Then in step 2, we'll be creating a sample data that we'll be taking it from LeetCode, right? So then we'll be defining the schema. We'll not be going with the default schema, infer schema option to it, since we are not going to import the data here. We are just going to create a Python list, and that Python list will be converting into a data frame where we'll be able to keep the data in a tabular structure, right? So we know what is data frame, right? So then we'll be creating a data frame. We'll be creating data frames. Then we'll be registering those data frames as Spark SQL views, right? Then we'll be simply querying as we are going to query in the SQL style, right? So basically we'll be following these steps of program that we'll be writing. And at the end of this video, we'll be knowing like, how we'll be setting up the data before we start doing any problem statement using Databricks, right? So without further delay, let's go here and try to solve the problem. Before we solve the problem, we need to understand the data, right? So here basically uh, we have taken two tables like employee data and departments data. Based on that, we'll be trying to understand how we are going to set up the data, whichever scenario it fits, right? Like whenever we are taking any sample uh, LeetCode problems, right? We'll just try to understand how we are going to set up the data first, then only we'll be able to solve the problem, right? So we are just trying to understand how we'll set up the data, which will be similar across all the problem statements, but the data set, obviously the data set and the tables that we'll be using, right, it will be different, but the process will be similar. So I'm here inside Databricks, and I'm just going to open this code, right? Here I'm just going to copy paste all those, right? And we'll be exploring what we are trying to do here, right? So let me just expand this one, right? Then so we'll just discuss one by one like what we are trying to do it here, right? So okay, so basically see here, as we discussed, right, we are just going to import all those functions, all those all those classes, functions, and the types of the data types that we are going to import. We'll be importing them, right? And we'll be using two data sets. Here we'll be using employee data set, and here we'll be using our departments data sets, right? Which will be our Python list, which is consisting of the tuples, right? We'll come to this on in details. But here, if you see, we are just trying to set up the schema here using the struct type and struct field. All that we'll try to understand. Okay, what is struct type and struct field? We'll come to this one. So for employee dataset, we are trying to set the schema here, and department dataset also we are trying to set the schema here explicitly, right? Using the programmatic approach, where like in real time also we'll be setting up this way only, right? So then we'll be creating those data frames. We'll see how we are I mean, attaching those um, uh, the schema and data, right? We are going to create data frames. Then we'll be creating, we'll be registering those data frames as temporary views and tables, right? So that using that, those tables will be simply able to query the data as if we are running a simple select star from table, right? The same way we'll be querying, right? So we'll just see the data, like how we can see from the database, I mean the data frame here. Then we'll see like how we can query in the similar way as we query in the database tables, right? So let me run this query, then we'll come to in detail, right? So let me just run this program first. Okay. Okay, so we are seeing the output here, right? Let's see what output we are getting. Once we see the output, then it will be easier for us to understand, okay, what we are trying to run the program, right? So let me just copy this one, right? I'll just copy this one. I'll take it to a notepad. I'm pasting it here. So let's try to see what we are trying to achieve it first of all, right? Then we'll get into that in detail. So here, if you see, we are trying to build the source data, which we'll be using in our problem statement, right? So the first two tables that we are seeing, for one is for employee, the other one is for department, right? That we have built using our DataFrame API, right? And the similarly, these two tables, employee and this is our departments table. I think there is spelling wrong, right? So this is departments table, right? So these two tables also we have built it using Spark SQL, which will be able to query these tables as if we are querying in normal tables, right? So we need to understand, okay, how we are going to build these two tables, right? We are not going to solve any problem statement here in this video, but we are just trying to understand, okay, how do we set up the data before we start the problem statement, right? So now if you see here, let's come down and we'll try to understand, right? Let me just close that. We have seen we are getting the output now, right? So now if you see here, right, we are just trying to print. It is up to us like what we wanted to print, right? So now if you see, what are all these here, right? We'll just try to understand each word of them so that going forward we will not be facing problem. Okay, what is it? What is this line of code is doing, right? So here if you see, we are just trying to import from PySpark, right? What is PySpark here? Apache PySpark, it's a Python API, enables the Python developer to process the large scale data, right? So without this, right, will not be able to explore the big data processing of PySpark, right? So we should be importing this Apache Spark API. Then only we'll be able to explore and leverage all the big data processing given by the API. Okay. So now what is SQL, right? If you see SQL, Spark SQL is a structured data processing module that provides data frame. It's a module in the PySpark API, right? Which provides data frame, SQL query, schema, and analytical function. Whenever we are trying to, obviously, if you are going to use any analytical problem, right? Obviously, we'll be having SQL queries, schema analytics, and all that. For that, we are going to use this SQL module, right? And without this, we will not be able to perform any SQL based data processing, right? So it is definitely we need to import this, right? So import is a keyword of Python, right? That you all know. Without that, we will not be able to recognize the functionality defined outside the current file, right? So we should be importing this and we should be using this keyword. And if you see what is window here, right? Window is a class in PySpark SQL used to define the partitioning and ordering rules for window functions, right? As you know, we are going to use ranking function, rank, dense rank, and all that. We are going to leverage, right? Those all are going to be very important from interview perspective. So we are going to use those functions, right? For that, we'll be using we will be using this class so that we'll be able to leverage all this Apache Spark API's functionalities, right? So that's the reason we are importing all this window class right here. So now if you come to this import statement, right, here we are trying to import the functionalities, right? Whatever functions that we are trying to import, right, we are just going to do that. Here column, right? Create a column object by referring a data frame column name, making expressions readable and dynamic, right? So here basically it is going to refer the a particular column in a data frame. For that, we are importing this so that we will be able to leverage the functionality of this column functions, right? So now if you see here, we are importing dense rank because many of the places dense rank is going to be used and will be whatever functions that we'll be using, we need to be importing them. It is not like only a column and dense rank. Whatever functionalities that we are going to use, that we should be importing, right? So hope you are clear on this part now. So we are importing all the window function related stuffs, and here we are importing all the functionality related uh, functions, right? Now obviously, since we are going to define a schema for the dataset that we'll be building, right? For that, we need to import the data types, right? Here, if you see integer is a data type, string is data type, structure fields, struct type, what are all these, right? So let's try to understand, okay, what are all these? So if you see here, what is types, right? So a PySpark module containing data type class used to define data frame schema explicitly, right? So whenever we wanted to define a schema, we need to import this, right? So now without the Spark really automatic schema inference, which may produce inconsistent or incorrect data, right? So if you are not importing this, we are not attaching the schema with the data set that we will be using, right? Obviously, that is not suggested in a production environment, right? So we should be defining the schema explicitly instead of letting the Spark internal engine decide it like what data type it is going to be taking for this particular column, which will create problem later, right? So we don't want to get into that. So we'll be defining the schema of the data set that we'll be taking explicitly. So here, as you know, like it is an integer data type, defines a column that store integer value. It is as simple as it is, right? Similarly, string defines a column that stores text values. Similarly, struct field defines an individual data frame column by specifying its name, data type, and nullability, like whether we are going to have null in that field or not, and all that. It is going to define an individual data frame column. So we'll see that, right? So if you see here, we have different columns, right? So it is going to define the schema properly, right? So now what is struct type, right? Combines the multiple structure object to form the complete data frame schema. The struct type is the what is the type of schema that we are going to give. Here if you see, struct field is going to be your the different fields, but when it comes to struct type, it is going to set the entire schema of the data frame, right? So that is going to be your struct type. So we are now so far we have seen, okay, we have imported this window function, we have seen all this window class, and we have imported all these functions whichever is needed for our program. Then we'll be importing the types, which is going to be defining the schema, right, for the data frame. So now if you see here, what is employee? It's a data frame. It's a Python list which we are taking, where it has list of tuples, right? So a Python list contains tuples where each tuple represents one immutable employee record. So it is going to defining one record in the data frame, where which will we have seen it, right? So it is going to be represented as one record in this particular data frame that we have created, right? So this is how we are going to, this is a Python list, okay? Without this, we will not be able to create the employee data frame, right? So similarly, for departments also, we are taking this data set, these two tuples, right? As a Python, it is also a Python list, right? So similarly, so we are taking two Python list, one for employee data frame and one for departments data set, right? So now if you see, we are defining the schema as we discussed, right? So we are just defining the schema here for both of the data sets, right? For employee and department. If you see struct type, as we have discussed here, right? Struct type, it is going to define the full column type, and struct field is going to be the specific column, and it is going to be for the particular row. What is the schema type that we are, the data type we are going to define, right? So for ID, we are taking it as the integer. As you can see in the data, we have it as integer, and J is your like string type. Similarly, our this data, right? It is going to be our salary is going to be our integer type, and department ID is also integer type. So based on that, we have defined here as well. ID is integer type, as you can see here. ID is integer type, and name is a string type, right? So you see, name is a string type. So we have defined the schema here, right? Now you got to know, okay, how we are defining the schema. All right. So now we are just going to create a data frame out of the schema and the data that we have taken, right? So if you see here, we are going to create the data frame here, right? Spark dot create data frame is a function, right? Here if you see a Spark session. So if you see what is Spark, first of all, we know, right? Whenever we are creating a data frame notebook, right? Spark gives us a object which is by default is available. We need not to create this object, right? As we do it in PyCharm or any IDE, right? In local, we need to create the Spark session, but here it is already available. So we are not going to create the Spark session. It's already available. So what is Spark here, right? So this Spark is the pre-created session object in Databricks that acts as the entry point to the Spark's functionality, right? It's the entry point to the cluster, and it is already readily available with Databricks, right? And let's try to understand what is the data frame, create data frame, right? So is Spark session method, like create data frame, is a Spark session method that converts native Python collection into distributed data frame using supplied schema, right? We are just going to give the schema and we are going to pass the data, right? So without this, Spark cannot transform Python object into data frame. So here, if you see, this is Python list, and like these are the Python lists, right? So to convert this Python list to a data frame object, right, we are going to use this method, right? And we will be passing the data, the Python list and the schema that we have built it here, right? This is the schema that I have built. Similarly, for departments also, we have built the data here, right? And here is the schema, right? You see, here is the schema. So based on that, it is going to create a data frame, right? So now, once we are done with this data frame, right, we'll be seeing, okay, how we can create a, how we can register those data frames as tables, so that we'll be able to query using SQL style, right? So now, if you see, you have created those data frames here, right, employee data frame, and we have one method here which help us to create a table-like structure using which we will be able to query like SQL text and the syntax, right? So create or replace temp view is a registered register a data frame as a temporary in-memory SQL view, so it can be queried using Spark SQL, right? That's what I discussed. So now it's going to be a temp view, a session scoped logical SQL table backed by data frame. So basically, it is going to create one table structure which is going to be specific to this particular session. If you are going to open another session, it is not going to be accessible over there, definitely, right? So we are going to create the Spark tables here, right? Spark views. Then we'll be displaying those data. We have show method, and right, so is a method to display the data frame content, right? So now this truncate false we are using, right, just to avoid truncation of the data that we are going to fetch from the data frame, right? So this is what, like, after we run these two test statement, right, we have got this output, right? So this is the output, like this is for departments and this is for employee. Sorry, this is for employee and this is for departments data frame, that the output that I have got for these two statements, right? So you can see the print statement. Based on that only we have printed it here. right? That you can see the print statements, right? Okay, so now we have seen like how we got the data set up for our employee and departments data using DataFrame API. Now that we have set up this, registered this two data frames as tables, I mean views, right? We'll be able to query them using our same SQL style, right? You see, select star from employee, and here we are doing select star from departments. So if you see these two print statement, right? Whatever outputs that we are seeing here, right? It is the output of these two statements here, right? So it is simple SQL, so I'm not going to discuss on this one. It is exactly the same SQL style. You can just go through this one since it is now it has come to the easier part. You can just see what is all this, right? So with this one, right, we should have a better understanding. Okay, how we are going to plan our this series and how we are going to set up the data, because we are not going to spend much time on this data setup. Like before we solve the problem, we'll be quickly doing the data setup, which we will not spend much time. That's why I'm spending some time here. Whoever is new, they can just go through these documents I'll be sharing so that they will get a better hold how we can create it, right? So now just to do a quick recap, so we have imported all the classes, functions, and data types that we need to use in our program, and we have defined this to uh, Python list to have the data set available. Then we have defined the schema for both of the tables, right? Then we have created a data frame for both the tables. Then we have registered those data frame as temp views using create or replace temp view function, right? Then we have displayed the data that is available in the data frame that we have created above. Then we have seen like how we can query those registered tables, right? Here, see, using the same SQL style syntax, right? So with this one, we should be able to proceed further for our problems that we'll be taking it out from right LeetCode platform, right? So now with this, hope you understand like all the steps that we have done practically. We have seen the data that we have got as output, right? And going forward in the next videos, right, we'll be solving we'll be taking one problem statement from LeetCode and we'll be solving using Databricks that we have seen now. So this is how our process is going to be followed for the entire series. We'll be coming up with multiple questions and its solutions. So let's try to focus some time on this one to understand so that we'll not face problem while trying to do the hands-on on the problem statements from LeetCode, right? So hope you all got it now. So we'll see you in the next video. Thank you.